Welcome to the Eastman Dental Podcast, where we hope to inspire, motivate, and provide education from our guests' experience.
Joining us on the podcast this week is Jennie Scrace.
Originally, you qualified as a dental nurse and worked in a specialist private practice.
Thinking back at that point to what I'd enjoyed most about being a hygienist and working in dentistry, and that was connection.
You then went on and undertook several roles, first doing dental hygiene, then running your own business, and now you're a life coach.
As part of my training to become a coach, I had to be coached. And that did feel a bit alien. But for me, I've discovered so much about my personality, who I am, and what authentically I want out of life. And I've never looked back.
Quite a lot of different roles there, and we can't wait to explore those a little bit further.
With your hosts, Josh Hudson and Julia Bruin.
So, Jennie, if we think right back to the start of your dental career, so when you first started out as a dental nurse, if you were going to describe that period in 3 words, what 3 words would you use to describe it?
Oh my goodness, 3 words. That's so tough. I think scary,
Okay.
exciting, and learny, if that is even a word. I learned so much in those early days.
Okay.
And that really set me up for my future career as a hygienist and for what I now do. So yeah, it was an exciting time.
So scary. It's interesting. Why? Tell us a bit more about why you chose scary.
So it was scary. It was my first full-time job coming out of college. I was very shy, very young, very green. And I went straight into this little private practice. It was a one-man band, and they specialised in endo.
Okay.
And of course, going in for my interview, I had no idea what endo was. They just kept saying this word endo, and I thought, well, how bad can it be? So then to find out that was endodontics, and it was a root canal treatment, and we would spend hours in root canals and, be measuring GP points and all sorts of things. It was quite daunting, but I loved it. Our patients were amazing. As well as having the endo side of it, we also had our own patients, so there weren't that many of them. But you got used to seeing people, 6 monthly, 12 monthly. People kept coming back, coming with their families, recommending their friends. It was almost a place for socializing. In the waiting room, people would bump into friends that were local. So it was lovely, getting that feeling of seeing people routinely and regularly was amazing. But the hours of endo, maybe a little bit dull, shall we say. But yeah, tough. It was a good start. It got me into some really good habits. And it was great to see a specialist really at work and see how passionate they were about what they did, about doing a good job for their patients. And that's what it's all about. So yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
And then an endodontist meets a periodontist, and the periodontist starts working at the practice.
Yeah.
And you start working with that periodontist, and then that eventually makes you decide to do dental hygiene training.
Yeah, it was something very similar to that. The endodontist was a guy called John Harker, and he trained in the Navy, which is where he'd met Colin Priestland, who was our periodontist. So Colin came along just doing 1 day a month. It started, just some local perio referrals. And that was crazy, really. It really opened my eyes to hygiene and to perio, and that there was a real need for educating our patients, for looking after their mouths, and for taking control of what they're doing in their own care. Working with Colin was just magnificent, really. He was so passionate about perio, and it really came across in the way he spoke to his patients, the analogies that he used to explain gum disease and perio. was just incredible. The patients hung off of his every word. And, you know, quite often I'd be like agog looking at him thinking, my God, this is amazing.
So you then started seeing your own patients, obviously. How did that feel then to be on the other side when you'd qualified as a hygienist and were now seeing your own patients? How did that feel?
The bar was set pretty high by having worked with the periodontists like that. I really tried to give everything that Colin gave, but of course it's impossible for a hygienist because of the time restraints. I think when you're training, you're in this lovely bubble, aren't you, really, of you're protected by the clinic, by your tutors. Everyone is there to help you.
Yeah.
But when you're out, you know, in general practice on your own, it's so different. You've got to keep yourself to time. There's no nurse, you know, clock watching for. Well, there wasn't when I first started hygiene. You had to.
Yeah, that's been a wonderful COVID positivity, isn't it? That whole issue about people now working with a bit more support. So that's if we can say that's a lovely thing that's come out of COVID in dentistry. That's one of the things I would put on.
It must be so lovely to have somebody else with you in the room, bit of support and backup. But yeah, it was challenging, I think, trying to be able to explain to patients about gum disease, what was happening for them, what they needed to do, to use those same analogies to get people on board was tricky because of the time. And then, of course, you've got to do a bit of scaling. We're always told you've got to scale, you've got to do as much as you can in the time. So I found that tricky. But as time went on, I mean, I was a hygienist for almost 20 years. So I knew exactly where I was going with it and what I was doing, treating my patients. So doing something in 30 minutes was fine. I could quickly get to the point, but I wasn't giving the point I really wanted to give.
So I think that's really interesting. So you said you did hygiene for nearly 20 years. And then there must have come a point where you decided, for whatever reason, and we can explore that a little bit, that you wanted to do something different. So can you tell us a little bit more about that kind of realization that you didn't want to necessarily do hygiene anymore, and then what you went on to do after that?
Yeah, I'd always been very proud to be a hygienist, really proud of what I'd achieved and what I'd done for 20 years. But over time, I found it harder and harder to do what I wanted to do, to be able to give the patients what I wanted to give. I felt so many of the practices that I was working in and had worked in, the focus wasn't on the patient. It was about the patients, getting them in, getting them out, getting them to pay for their fees, moving them on. And that wasn't what I wanted. That's not why I became a hygienist. It wasn't to generate money. Of course, it's an income. We all need to earn money. But it wasn't to put pressure on people to have treatment or to get them in, get them out. It wasn't a conveyor belt. I wanted to be able to give a lot more than I was giving. So I was becoming a bit disillusioned with it. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, things had changed a bit in my personal life as well. My mum died in 2015, and that had a massive effect on me personally. Prior to that, my dad had died 4 years earlier. He'd had Alzheimer's, so a lot of the time we'd been caring for him. My mum's health declined, and so things just got tricky. And I just felt after she had died, I need to do something different. I need to do something for me. So I came out of dentistry in 2016, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted something different. So
I think everybody can resonate with that, can't they? Definitely. I think that there are definite moments in everybody's career. I mean, we're talking about dentistry at the moment. We could be talking about anything, couldn't we?
Absolutely.
That people have those moments where they sit back and really think, hey, what's going on in life?
Yeah, what's this all about?
Exactly, especially when there's been a number of things which obviously happened with yourself as well.
For sure. And I was quite fortunate then. My husband had a building company and he needed support administratively. So I took on that role, which meant I could be at home. Mm-hmm. Both my kids were at school then, one doing A-levels, the other approaching their GCSEs. So it just made sense that I was around at home for them and I could just concentrate a bit on me. So I did that for a little while and then thought, this isn't all it's cracked up to be. I'm a bit bored now. I need to find something else. And so that's when I took on the Sandwich Hut, which again was completely different. I thought it was an opportunity to get out, to meet people again. And I really enjoyed baking. So I thought, I can do my bakes, I can sell cakes as well and just make sandwiches. And the opportunity came up to rent this, it's a static van on an industrial estate. So most of my customers were builders or, sales reps, that sort of thing. So the hours were long, it had to be there at 6:30 in to get set up and, and it sort of dragged on into the afternoon, and it wasn't, financially, it wasn't that lucrative. As fun as it was, and as much as I enjoyed it, it wasn't as fulfilling as I wanted it to be. And that little connection, the brief connection with a customer coming for a sandwich or a coffee, that little bit of a chat was everything to me. And I thought, hang on, there's something I'm missing here. And thinking back at that point to what I'd enjoyed most about being a hygienist and working in dentistry, and that was connection with other people. And, getting to know people on a regular basis. It's the same, in a coffee shop where you've got customers coming in for their coffee, your regulars. You're like, hi, how are you? What are you up to today? And that's how it was for me. And it had been like that as a hygienist, people coming every 2 months, every 3 months, every 6 months, or even just passing people in the reception who'd come to see the dentist maybe and, stop for a quick chat. And that's what I loved, that connection. So I thought, what can I do? I don't want to go back into dentistry again. I want something that's going to give me that connection with other people.
And that connection beautifully, fits into what you're doing now,
Absolutely.
Which is life
Life coaching, yeah.
So perhaps tell us about what that involves, really, for those people who aren't familiar with those facilities and opportunities of being with somebody like yourself, like a life coach.
So life coaching is all about you. It's all about the client. It's exactly what they want. It's their stuff. It's something that mustn't be confused with counselling or therapy. It's completely different, although it is focused around the client. It's open to everybody. So everyone has a desire or a dream, a hope, something they aspire to. And it's tapping into that and looking at your life in every area and finding out what it is that you want to change, that you want to make a difference. And then it's working together in the coaching partnership to get you from where you are now to where you want to be.
Can be quite a scary thing though, change, can't it, for people?
It's incredibly scary, yeah. And I think that's what deters a lot of people from having coaching. Or from looking into it, because they're not sure what it's going to throw up. There is an uncertainty and a hesitancy about what's going to come up. As part of my training to become a coach, I had to be coached. And that did feel a bit alien. But for me, I've discovered so much about my personality, who I am, and what authentically I want out of life. And I've never looked back from that moment. And it's something that I will keep doing, is keep having a coach myself, because it pushes you on, it pushes you forward to reach those goals that otherwise may just stay as a pipe dream.
So what does that, out of interest, what does that look like in terms of the coaching? Is that kind of a regular meetings over a long period, or how does it practically work out?
Yeah, I mean, what I do firstly is I arrange to have 8 sessions with a client, and that can be on a weekly basis or a fortnightly, whatever really fits in with them. It's better if we can do it on a weekly basis, because the more regularly you see somebody and you work on what they're trying to get towards, the more momentum that picks up. So it's generally about a 90-minute session, certainly no less than that we have each week. And we'll just come together and talk about where they are, where they're getting to, setting some actions for the next time. But yes, often there's a lot of really deep work that goes on to find out what it is that's making you tick to get you going forward. Yeah.
I mean, you sound very lucky that you found your place that in your new career. But what sort of advice would you give somebody who's trying to get out of that work rut, that whole, I'm not quite sure what to do, I'm not sure whether I want to stay in dentistry, retrain, do anything? This podcast really is designed to help people look at things in a slightly different way. So what sort of advice would you give a colleague who came to you, not necessarily for life coaching, but just actually how to get out of a rut that they are currently going through?
You need to look at the fundamentals, and that's, what do you want? What would make the biggest difference for you in that moment? What needs to change? You need to strip back and really focus on yourself, not about the shoulds or the shouldn'ts, what other people expect or what other people are wanting from you. It's about you. It's about what you want. You've got to strip right back to that.
And perhaps be a little bit selfish, because I think, we're in healthcare, aren't we? And being a bit selfish and stripping back to yourself is perhaps not always something that people feel terribly comfortable about.
Absolutely, but there's nothing selfish about that. Selfish is a tricky word, isn't it? I think, because if you're selfish, then you put yourself first and self only. Okay? If you're being selfish, then it's putting yourself first. Like if you're on the aeroplane and the oxygen masks drop down, they tell you, don't they, sort yourself out first before you can help anyone else. And that's exactly what you need to do. It's important and it's necessary. You must always take care of yourself.
I think that's something we keep coming back to in terms of all of the conversations that we've had is, from a dental point of view, you can't provide the best care for your patients unless you're in the right position to do that yourself. So
that's very true.
It's definitely something that needs to be considered.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting drawing some parallels between yourself and some of the other people that we've spoke to, and generally finding those things in your career that you enjoy and then pursuing those things. And it seems like for yourself, it was that communication, that speaking to people, right back to the start you were saying about the socializing in that first dental practice and then having that with the sandwich hut and now doing that now. So how has all of that previous dental experience kind of impacted your ability to now be a life coach? Is there a link between those two?
Oh, for sure. There's a massive link. You know yourself, when you have your patients, they come in, you lay them down. There's something about that where they feel like they're laying on a couch, don't they, with their psychotherapist or somebody, and they open up to you, don't they? Patients rather, are in a vulnerable position. When you lay them back, you're working in their mouths. You don't know what's going on, do you, as the patient? You can't see. You've got to put your trust in your clinician, haven't you? And I think that's what my clients do when they come to see me for coaching. They want to have a safe space where they can be vulnerable, they can open up, they can share things with me that they probably haven't shared with anybody ever. And that is such a privileged place to be, is to have that. And I think that that's one of the very similar things with dentistry, is that you have that trust. Also, you're used to dealing with lots of anxious, nervous patients. So you have to have the ability to put people at their ease, to give them a sense of comfort. And I know I do give that to people. And that's something that I got from being in dentistry, and I think more from working in hygiene.
On the flip side of that, is there anything that you miss from dentistry? So you've taken that component forward to your new role, but is there anything that you've maybe left behind that you miss from being a hygienist?
This is such a good question. God, Gosh, what do I miss?
Not the
All
short.
of that plaque and all of that calculus.
I'm not sure I missed that. I do miss the intricacy of the job, though, the using the instruments and the satisfaction of removing subgingival calculus from a pocket. Yeah, I do miss that, but that's it, really. That is it. I'm still in touch with a lot of my colleagues, although we don't often talk teeth these days. We talk about other things. But yeah, I do miss the intricacy of it. Yeah, that sort of work and the delicateness. I think working in somebody's mouth is a massive skill, isn't it? Being able to get to all the nooks and crannies.
Definitely.
And I feel that took a lot of years to get that right, to be able to see those, those upper eights and to get your scalar behind them. But yeah, I do miss that, actually, I think. Yeah, working in a mouth.
I think, though, you sort of said about it being a privilege and being in a very trusted position with your life coach clients. And I think, like you say, that's a very similar situation in dentistry, isn't it?
Isn't it?
And also we see our patients grow. So you must see your clients grow in a way that, we have anything from children coming to see us to obviously the whole range of people, but yours are growing really very, very deeply. And I'm guessing,
a different way.
Yeah, that must be very, very rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. It is slightly different to dentistry. I just had a thought then that because you're seeing people year in, year out on you for dentistry, hoping that they'll come back to the practice and come back to you. But for life coaching, I could be coaching somebody for 6 months, a year, maybe longer term than that. But at some point, it will come to an end. They will go off on their own. And that, for me, is tough. It's an ending. I've been part of their life. I've helped them. But it is time to let them go. But you don't have that so much in dentistry, do you? I think a patient is often loyal to you for as long as they're in that area, maybe, or, So that's different. But the connection is deeper. But all the relationships are valid.
I know that you're not necessarily in the dental world now, but if you think back to that time, or even now, currently, do you think there's anything in the dental world that we should be either doing or stop doing? I mean, do you think there's anything out there that we could learn from your side of things with being a coach?
Yeah, definitely. Again, it's all about coming back to what you want and the outcomes that you want. Really, I think within practices, you have to think what's best for your staff and treat everybody as an individual to get the best out of everybody, and to really make sure that you are giving value to your patients, because that's what it's all about, isn't it? That's what we're all taught, is that the most important person in the dental surgery is the patient. And I don't think that's always remembered. And I think that's something that needs to be addressed.
So I understand that during the pandemic, you kind of changed your role a little bit again and started doing something different. So can you tell us a little bit about what you got up to during the pandemic?
Yeah, so I was working on the call centre on the 119 line for Public Health England. So obviously as COVID came around, I couldn't keep going with the sandwich hut any longer, so everything would shut down. And I was very fortunate. A friend of mine said, oh, look, if you're looking for some work, I know that there's this, this NHSX contract coming up. Are you interested? So I thought, oh yeah, I'll give it a go. But yeah, goodness me, that was overwhelming. It was a surreal time for all of us. But yeah, it was very odd. So obviously working at home through my computer, hundreds of calls a day from worried citizens, people who were really sick, phoning for advice, really it was set up just as the testing line. So that's all we were supposed to be doing, was booking appointments, helping citizens who weren't able to use a computer to book an appointment to go for a test or to have a home delivery. But it was so much more than that. People rang for advice, asking us questions about all sorts of things, about symptoms, what to do. It grew legs. And as you know,
yeah, but I think the whole of COVID grew legs, didn't it? I mean, let's be honest. I don't think. This COVID story, I think, is one that we're going to, look back in time and say, wow, all of these things that went on. But it sounds like an amazing project you were part of.
Oh, goodness me, yes, it was massive. It was. There's never going to be anything else like it, I don't think. Well, I hope not in my lifetime.
Yes.
Anyway.
Well, I think we probably all agree with that.
Things changed day to day. As new government advice came out, things were changing, sometimes by the hour. We were all, suddenly an emergency email came through. You mustn't say this anymore. You must say this. This is what we're doing now. It was quite bizarre to be working so closely with something that was government-led. Quite eye-opening, really.
Oh, I can imagine.
Extraordinary.
I mean, and actually, if we think about COVID in dentistry, if you'd said to me, we're still going to be wearing big masks and lots of plastic aprons and all that sort of stuff more than 2 years on, I would have said, don't be so utterly ridiculous. I mean...
I know. Crazy times. I remember actually messaging one of my hygiene friends saying, my goodness, what's happening in dentistry? What are you doing? She said, I don't think we're going to work for 3 months and then we'll just go back to normal.
Well, I remember talking to a patient literally the week before we closed down, and I said to her something, she'd sort of said to me, do you think this is COVID? Do you think it's going to be quite a big thing? And I'm like, no, thinking, oh, well, let's just see. But I thought, no, let's try and be positive. I think, but a wonderful... chink to your armour to do that, because I'm sure, like you said, you saw many, many things in your time of helping out on that line.
Absolutely. It was such a surreal time for everybody. Things changed from one day to the next. So from a point of view of working on the 119 line, there was so many different callers that rung, people with families, people on their own who were sick. We had foreign people that we had to instigate the language line for. It was just so difficult. You didn't know what type of call you were going to get from one moment to the next.
Yeah,
it could be somebody
I can only imagine
just wanting advice, or somebody who was fighting for breath at the other end of the phone and really needed help. So yeah, it was enormously challenging, and a lot of angry, frustrated people that couldn't get their appointments, couldn't get their results. Yeah.
Do you think that COVID has made many people reflect? I mean, we hear about it all of the time, but you may have experienced it firsthand as a life coach, that these last couple of years have really made people reevaluate, reset,
for sure,
their lives and therefore themselves for the future.
Yeah, it's definitely been a pivotal point, I think, for many, many people. I think many people being able to work from home, that's changed a lot of what happens, on people's commute, what people want to do. It's massive. It's at the bottom, I think, of a lot of what I see clients.
Yeah, I mean, actually, we've done tele-dentistry, haven't we? Who would have thought you could actually do dentistry via the telephone? But indeed, this hospital has conducted many, many appointments. If you're waiting back on a biopsy result, or just even having an initial consultation before the patient coming in for radiographic examination or anything like that. So the working from home thing has definitely. The tentacles of that have gone far and wide, hasn't it?
Absolutely. It's really changed the way that we live our lives, hasn't it?
I think it's been a big reset. I guess, I don't know whether you see that in your life coaching, whether people are seeing that as a reset, and maybe that period has kind of energize people to actually think, I want to do something differently, and then maybe coming to you and trying to pursue those things that maybe they wouldn't have pursued if they hadn't had that kind of interruption.
Yeah, it's definitely a time for change, and I think people have seen it that way and taken it that way. A time to reevaluate what's going on in their lives and to change that. Yeah, definitely a pivotal point.
So taking all of that into account, thinking back to the start where we asked you the 3 words to describe your initial stages of your career, if we asked you for 3 words to describe where you're at now, what 3 words would you use?
Fun. It's a lot of fun doing what I do. Connection, because that's what it's all about, is connecting with others and building on those relationships. And exciting, because I don't know where this journey for me is going to end or where it's going to go to next. It's such an exciting journey and an exciting path to be on that, yeah, it's brilliant. I love it.
It's great. And that follows on to what is next. Do you have any plans, anything that's going to change in the future, or are you happy to kind of carry on where you are at the moment and no more career changes?
I'm really happy with where I am at the moment, and I can't see that changing a great deal, although there's other strings I'd like to add to my bow. Mm-hmm. I'm really interested in following part of my career as a counsellor, so that's something else that I might look at in the future. But for now, I'm really happy with what I'm doing with my clients, definitely giving them the very best that I can, and all my experiences to date have helped me on that journey to be able to do that. So I'm working on a group program at the moment that I want to bring to the masses for self-awareness and self-development, and we'll see what comes of that. So it's a very exciting time.
Well, we're thrilled to have you on this episode, so thank you very much for coming.
Thank you so much. I've loved it.
We hope you have enjoyed listening to this episode. We would love to hear your suggestions for future guests. Remember to follow us on social media using hashtag the Eastman Dental Podcast. And if you like what you hear, please like, share, subscribe and listen out for future episodes.